Welcome to spring. Spring of 2025. Who thought it would occur? So welcome to this Hunter Living History Showcase for September 1st of 2025. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on right now, which is the Awabakal people. And I would like to pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. And I would also like to pay respects to anyone zooming in and the lands that they're zooming in from and the Aboriginal custodians of those lands. And again, pay my respects to those ancestors and welcome them both in spirit and in physical presence to these proceedings today. Okay, so we've got a big discussion that we're going to have on the university strategic directions and also the library strategic directions and what the community would love to see. All right. But before then, we've got a few updates with regards to the local historical scene. And the first will be from Anne with regards to the passing of Aubrey Brooks.
Yes, and many of you probably heard by now that it's a bit of a industrial heritage warrior in Newcastle. Aubrey Brooks passed away about 2 weeks ago. We did an oral history with him for the store project, and he gave some really interesting recollections about the suburb of Wickham and the store. But yeah, it was a really interesting sort of nice family history for him and legacy like for all. Anyone that's interested in attending his funeral, it's this Thursday at 2:30 at the chapel at Mayfield. It is Pettigrew's. And it's also online, so I've added that link on the Hunter Living Histories page for anyone that's interested in attending.
Yeah. So Aubrey was on the face of BHP workers in the industrial age of Newcastle. So larger than life character. Right. Next good news is the Glenn Norman here. Chit chat on Loop and Stab, who is half of the genius team that make all the Stories of Our Town films. So he's going to give us an update on the 5 or 6 that are currently all happening all at once right now. Over to you, Glenn.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say how sad I was to hear about Aubrey passing, because he was in our BHP film. It was the second film we made, and he was our first interview for that film. And my God, his passion for that whole story was incredible. And also his personal archive of photos and everyone he introduced us to made that film happen. So I can't he was a giant, a titan of a man. So anyway, I'm sad to hear that news. We've had a little bit of a lull. We've had issues with funding and stuff, and now we seem to be back on track. The first big thing to drop, we've been working with Jerry Swartz and his team on filming the transition of the post office. The Jewel of Newcastle is going to come back. That was great. We helped them make a little film which involved the mayor and Barney Collins Architects and everyone to try and help Heritage New South Wales open the purse strings. And with that came $1 million grant, and with that came funding for us to actually film the regeneration of that building. And part of that process, I would hope, would be to interview past staff and say, about the purpose of the building and how it's transitioning. There's a lot of story there. So that's great that we got it, but unfortunately that's going to take 3 years. so we're filming as we go, and sadly time lapse, and sadly we were in there 6 months ago. As anyone who's lived in Newcastle or in Australia has realised, it's not stopped raining in that 6 months, and part of their issue is they weren't watertight. So they were having trouble getting permission from the council to pump the water out. So we could notice a huge difference in that 6 months and how it deteriorated. And that's really terrifying, but they reckon it's probably put them $1 million behind. So the whole process of getting the grant is, anyway, it's going to get done. That's the main thing. And we're very excited we get to do brand designs on steroids. It's a wonderful thing. The other film that we've started, we just did the first 2 interviews with, is we are doing the gay history of Newcastle. This has been coming up for a while. Anne and I were at the Star Hotel last night where they were celebrating the 100-year anniversary. Well, sorry, John was there as well. John was there. And we were discussing, well, we were talking about the 100 years and we were there to talk about our film that we made about the Star Hotel, but I've been part of a panel that John Whitty has been part of as well, and I got to know John a little bit through this process, and the idea of doing this film was an idea that has now come to reality. In fact, we spent the morning at John's house interviewing him and Helen, this is a really exciting film. I can't wait to really delve into it. There's a horrific part to this story, but it's also a story of community and resilience, and it's fascinating. And most of these horrific things happened within my lifetime, so I find that incredible to hear, because some of the stuff that I heard today sounded like it should have been at the 19th or 18th century, but it was there. So we're very excited about that. And as John mentioned, there's a big one coming after that, this is huge, but there's a potential to do the one that everyone's told us we have to make, is the history of coal in Newcastle and the impact. And we'll know about that in 2 weeks. But I would say the priority is really going to turn to this gay film. After the morning we've had and the stories we've got, this needs to be told, it needs to be done properly. And at the moment, I'm just going to say it, we don't have enough money, and I'm not being this is going to be very labour intensive to get right. We've had some donations which have really helped, and we're about halfway there, but we're just going to keep making this thing because this story has to be told. It has to be told properly, and it has to be told by the people that lived this story. I mean, we film it, but we're not telling the story, and it'll floor you, the history. And as I said, there's a lot of joy in it as well. So it's not just hitting you over the head with how bad things are. You're seeing it change.
It's a real story.
It's a real story, and and I can't wait to show you all. But,
this is going back to 1804 when the Irish was down here to coal.
You know, I can't imagine when you got 90% men in the town, there wasn't.
Look, he starts with the ferns.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, well, anyway, there's a lot of story, and there's a lot of story. Are you talking about the gay film, or are you talking about the coal
No,
film?
I'm talking about coal.
That's true.
There you go. Anyway, I took that the wrong way. Anyway, but luckily, every time I think we've made 21 films about Newcastle, and every time I think we've run out, we haven't. And I as affected as I was this morning by these stories, I was proud to be part of telling the story. It felt important, hearing, and nothing against what John said, but Helen's story is really quite powerful, and you know this story, that you go, holy crap, this is a human story about where I live, and I want to tell this. I want everyone to know this story. So very, very excited to be working on that. Is that too much of your time now?
No, you've got
Can I
the
just also say that I have a book that has a picture of the post office in it, and it said that it was based on the post office in, not quite sure whether it was Liverpool or Birmingham, one of those places. So when I went over there, I looked around for it and couldn't see anything that looked like our post office. And I used to volunteer down at the Maritime Centre, and I just happened to talk about it one day, and a fellow who had come from that town said, no, it's not there because it was bombed in the Second World War.
Ah.
So we have it here.
fantastic.
And the story of that also is that there were two architects. So the first architect designed the building without balconies. And then the second architect was employed who put the balconies on, and they said the proportions are wrong. It has to look right from the outside. So when you're upstairs, there's like a 1.5 metre staircase. Like you think the balcony would be level, and it makes no sense. And there's no stairs at the moment. So we had to jump out a window and almost broke our ankles getting out there because we're at the window height jumping out. And that's because this architect wanted it to look right from the road. So there you go. So that might have been the previous look as well. It could have been, yeah. But fascinating. Thank you.
Centra?
Oh, yeah, well, Centra House, yeah. So there's this incredible old hospital in Maitland, which is this fascinating building, which you've been doing some research on, and you've been working, and we got run by this very eccentric person. Well, actually, I don't know if I should say this. I got run by the council to tell me that I should apply for a grant about this film. And so that's never do you get called by the people giving the grant to submit a grant. Anyway, so that's happened, that small grants happen. So they rang me, we've done that, it's in process, we're going to make this film. There's a lot of, I love it because it's going to be kind of quirky. There's ghost stories, there's a lot of weirdness. And the strangest thing about the whole story for me was that the woman who rang me, who owns the building now, Catherine, she rang me and told me what a thriving art scene was happening in that area. And she mentioned the person who lived across the road from her as someone I should care about, and it ended up being the lead singer of my old band. So she had no idea that I knew him, and she's like, "Oh yes, and we have the scriptwriter and musician, blah blah blah, living across the road." And he definitely wouldn't want me to put that out there. But anyway, and it was just like, "Oh right, that's very interesting." So there you go. So there's that happening. There's
What's the fifth one?
well, there's the Estremina is possible, and also there's another film that is. So there's a film, these friends, Alan Shawner, who's a well-known photographer, and his wife, Carol, put a book out. What's the name of the book, Anne?
Is that the one?
Spirit of Place.
Spirit of Place.
Yeah.
And so what it is, it's a fascinating book and beautifully
They
represented.
spoke on it in our
Yeah.
last.
Yeah, so it's all the cultural sites, Aboriginal cultural sites in the Hunter Valley. So these are rock art, these are rock carvings, and all. They've gone out and got it, and they've got the Aboriginal elders that take schools out there, and and do all that. They said they did the book, but no one reads books, and so they've come to us and said, "We'll help you find the funding. We have the story. We have the connection with community. Do you want to make it?" And I said, "Well, this is a trick question. These are all the things that we have to overcome ourselves." So where that's up to is, I guess I could say AGL have called a meeting, the energy company, saying they might be interested in financing that film. So that and what's cool about all this, you've got a post office, you've got a hospital, you've got the history of Queen in Newcastle, you've got coal, you've got all these different elements. That's what we set out to do. We didn't want to make just one genre, doubling up. We want to tell Newcastle from every single angle, and I feel like this next group of films does that. It represents a larger community. It's Indigenous people, it's gay people, it's our heritage, and it's really coal. You can't deny, no matter what your opinion is of coal, and we all have different opinions, but it has shaped this town above any other single thing. Whether it's the shape of the harbour, whether it's how the suburbs were formed, whether it's, how we were protected in the Second World War. BHP came to Newcastle because you use twice as much coal as iron ore to make steel. We have the coal. That's why. So that's all these stories are going to be exciting. And if you know any rich friends, we run on the smell of an oily rag, and we're not being greedy, but I like it if we know the money is there and we can just concentrate on telling these stories, because swapping hats all the time is exhausting. So it's just about, okay, let's just get on with it.
The aim of this exercise is to keep Glenn and Tony making films
Yeah.
and not working as brickies labourers.
Yeah.
Do you know any kids? That's the end.
Yeah, rich friends. Where are they?
That's fantastic. So stay tuned for all those. Now, John Whitty, did you want to say a few words about the Star and the celebrations that are currently
Look,
going on?
I haven't prepared anything, but I did speak last night about the Star. What I concentrated on was not really the tits and feathers sort of history of the Dragon Star, but how it got there and how it stayed there and how it got kicked out. And around it, law and order, the whole issue of policing in Newcastle. To get there, the drag started at a police pub, the Orient in Watt Street, and the police then took the formers and the customers down to the Star Hotel, which was empty, and that's where Galinda and Stella started their drag shows in the back bar. They progressed. They sort of. It wasn't a setback for them. They saw it as a challenge, and they sort of occupied one of the storefronts, which is on the west side of the building, and opened that as a showroom. And were enterprising. They charged entry to it and resold alcohol to the customers while they performed at the front. It was a scaled down version of what was happening in Sydney at Ivy's Birdcage in Taylor Square. Then Lloyd Moffat, who was the licensee, said, "No, middle bar for you because you can make me money, not yourselves." So they got the gig there at another tiny stage near the middle bar. So that was where they stayed for a while, and then the end of the story was that for some reason Donnie Graham, the then licensee, decides to kick out all puffs, which is coded for puffs, I suppose. It's and that made headlines and really pissed off a lot of people. And then he sort of added to that by saying that he didn't want any drag queens or lesbians near his children, and nor does any Newcastle mum and dad. So he left on a sour note with the LGBTIQ community, but the good thing was that another opportunity was opening at 810 Hunter Street. Romeo's became gay and was renamed Pipers. So the performers went down there and had a fabulous time and didn't have to worry about Donnie. And in the meantime, those 12 months later, within 12 months, the exploded with a riot. And that was due basically to Donnie and his management skills. Now, that was it. Then the encompassing thing was law and order. Because it was a cop pub, I'm suggesting that we should look at what links there were with Donnie or the licensees and the police that went there and the information they were gathering on homosexual men in Newcastle. In 1978, David Marr did an expose of police methods in Newcastle and exposed police, the CIB here as collecting, I think there was 600, 300, maybe let's say 300 dossiers on men at that stage, and then they increased them as they investigated the murder. Use that as an excuse to fingerprint, take statements from 600 homosexual men in Sydney, and then built up some intelligence base as to who was who and what. And anything you said in there, like you said, you're in a same-sex relationship and you have sex with your partner. Well, as far as he's concerned, that was a crime and that needed to be documented and acted on at any stage they like. That was the fear in the community at that stage in the 70s. It was also a trigger for the Mardi Gras in Sydney, but that's the next story. So I just ended up not saying, well, I haven't had can't get access to police files, so they'll have to wait.
Thank you very much. Well, that's amazing. Well, that'll probably be touched on.
We've already filmed it.
There you go. All right. So
amazing.
We moved from, and look, the Star Hotel is probably, the riot is probably the one story that the world knows us by. Because years ago when we were dealing with Tony Robinson's production company and formulating those stories, there was one story in their production list that never went off the list, and that was the Star Hotel riot. So everything else was negotiable, but that is what we're known around the world. We're known around the world as the town that rioted because of shutdowns.
So where's this exhibition on?
At the Star.
At
Yeah, so I don't know, is it shut down now? It was over the weekend.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't think
You can just wander in, and it's just
Down
on
the
the
lane
walls.
there.
It's called Bernie's Bar now,
Oh.
and that's actually it is a gay bar now. It's been Bernie's Bar was a bar in Hamilton, wasn't it? It was an early drag bar. It was a wine bar,
Jack Anson's bar in Oakland Street.
and so they've, as a tribute, they've renamed it Bernie's Bar.
And did that become the Centurion, John, after that?
Yeah,
Bernie's?
yeah.
That's right.
And
I remember
others.
I used to go there. So.
Now, we've got a couple of Lambton-related stories. Many years ago, we met this photograph that Robert's brought in the frame was the photograph that we met Robert by when he was under a pseudonym with Baldy McSpecs, which he still uses. But one night we posted this up on, can you see that?
Ron's having a
We
look.
posted that up on Facebook.
There, Ron.
And because we scanned it from one of the documents in the archives, and this Baldy McSpecs guy went out within 40 minutes and took the modern panorama as best as he could. And that fella is now Robert Watson.
Yeah, so that photo that I just held up to the camera was donated to me by a guy who was a printer in Lambton, Kevin Goodwin, 93 years old. And he said to his daughter, give this photo, which came from the Mechanics Institute, give this to that history guy in Lambton. And she said, Robert Watson, that's the guy. So, because his house has been sold. And I haven't checked this part yet, but this was originally 4 photos that were put together into a book in 1904 called Panorama of Glorious Lambton or something like that. And the other thing which you can see if you're in the room is yesterday afternoon a drone guy from Rankin Park went to the same spot, put his drone up above the tree line because there's so many trees there now you can't see anything. And I've copied that onto the top of the old photo and drawn lines. So you can still see the rotunda and the Mechanics Institute and Crowders Street going up the hill. So that's 100 years later. So and I was going to use that as an example of saying, you know, if we're talking about the connection between the university and the community, is there's something there that the university had that went out to the community. I grabbed it and did something with it. Then that was 12 years ago, 13. And then yesterday, another guy, now that drones are around, has gone and added more value that we add in there, and then I put it back. And if I'm around in another 100 years' time, we'll do it again.
I feel like it's the continuity of historical life.
Yes, yes.
That's good. Well, thank you very much, Robert.
Okay.
Erica, just before we leave the other thing, did you want to say a little update on the Central House project?
Yeah, I can do that.
So Erica is our Vera Deacon intern, and she's working on the history of Central House, which is lots of opportunities are opening for you. So over to you.
Yes. For one thing, I thought, we're going to start out with this little bunch of letters and digitize them, and then over time it's just kind of expanded into this massive tree with different branches going off in different directions and opportunities. So it's super exciting. I'm almost actually finished the letters segment, but one of the branches going off into a new opportunity is we're going to work with the Australian Journal of Garden History, Australian Garden History Journal, and we are going to write an article on Cintra's heritage gardens, which is super exciting. So we've had a meeting in the last, was it a week ago, I think it was, we had a meeting with everyone to kick that off. And also, and something I was meaning to talk to you about, we've heard from Simon, the family of the previous owners, and he's actually got some more material that we might be interested in looking at. So little branches in every direction. It's growing very rapidly, much bigger than what we originally thought we'd be getting into. But I think we should definitely take advantage of all these opportunities. And there's lots of future potential for more students to get involved and just keep it rolling. There's so much there, and it's a lot of fun.
So you'll be writing an article on wisteria.
Yes.
And also the editors of the garden history, that they're interested in the Margaret Senior collection as well. So we're thinking next year having a Hunter Living Histories meeting, promoting it to the historian students, and then we can do something to highlight the Margaret Senior as well as showcase the sort of project.
So Erica's got an article to write by February of 2025. Yep. That's slated for publication. The thing for me was just making contact with Simon Long again, because I hadn't seen him in over 20 years. And we came together basically to get images from the Pender. So the Pender architectural plans of Sintra is what Simon was trying to get beautiful images of. The problem was that at that time, about 2003, digital technology, every time you blinked, another camera had been released with 10,000 more pixels, so we were constantly. I introduced him to every single photographer that the university had at the time, and every time he came back, he needed a bigger camera, and so it took about 3 or 4 years for him to get the image he wanted. And he told me the other day they're still all rolled. He finally got them printed, but they're still rolled up. So. Anyway, but it was great contacting him again because the letters that Erica's working on are Simon's family's letters. So we needed to contact them and we needed their blessings on this project to get the permission. So he's just over the moon with the works. They're fantastic. Now, back to Lamb.
Could I ask, this is Sintra in Regent Street, Maitland.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that Barry Maitland lives not far from there. He lives in
That's right, yeah.
It's a busy street.
There's pop stars and professors.
Famous
Okay, back to Lambton now, and now we have Judy Henry, who is concerned with the development that's happening at the moment, and she's seeking to raise the issue with us. Over to you, Judy.
I went to a meeting the other night and one of the ladies speakers was about the Lambton football field that the state government want to use for a basketball stadium. And there's QR codes here if anyone would like to put a submission in. If we keep losing our green, once you get to lose green space, you can't get it back again. Newcastle being on a floodplain, if we keep filling in our green space, it might be all right for that lot of land covered in concrete, but it's going to affect all the other houses around them. And it's not just Lambton that I'm worried about, it's the rest of Newcastle and the Broadmeadow. And I just thought I'd bring it up with this meeting if anyone would like to put a submission in to the state government. The QR codes are on this. And later I'd like to bring up about flooding within Newcastle.
Yeah, well, I just want, because I was having a talk to Judy, this is the kind of thing that segues into our next conversation, I think, which will be about the university's relationship with communities.
Yes.
And
there's no one to go to. It's like people are knocking against a brick wall.
Yeah.
And what we need is an educated institution that can back up what we're concerned about and bring it up to the state governments who just seem to be concerned about developing without thinking about the consequences of what we're doing. It's for the future. It's not just for now.
Isn't it all part of the old Commonage Marsh?
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Yeah. So the whole thing is and Lambton Park's the same, but Lambton Park never forgets that it's a former marsh, which is why you get boggy areas and stuff. But that whole sweep from Broadmeadow, it's a complete,
whole area.
there's a wetland.
Yes.
And when I was growing up, we lived in high years, there used to be bulrushes because that's how we used to get our arrows when we were rogues.
And all these people they've not lived in Newcastle.
No.
They're making these decisions.
But that's not far from that field where the
Yes,
bulrushes
yes.
were,
Yeah.
quite close to that
Yeah.
field. So it is outrageous.
Yeah.
see, on that issue, we've got, when you talk about these things, I always think of the 1910 Newcastle plan, which I've overlaid in Google, and you can see where the low-lying areas are. And they've got complete developments on sites that were former swamps.
But the thing is that Newcastle City Council is only using the 1 in 100 flood plan. They're not looking at the other plans.
Well, see, it's always been curious for me to say, okay, I would love to go and see whether these people on this particular part of this plan have rising mould issues or damp issues or what happens when they flood. See, this is the good thing. I mean, even going through the papers of Colin Kay, he was a physicist, but he got involved in local community issues to apply that academic rigour to whatever was concerning the local community. So he was interested in riding a bicycle, so he did a lot of work with the bicycle people about cycleways and things like that. Yep. But in your situation, a few years ago when the Waratah had an issue with contamination with the gasworks, we did overlays for them. They had no records from the former borough council on it, so we did timelines from Trove so that they knew exactly where these gas cylinders were. They bulldozed every single property around them. So they're currently decontaminating the site. But I was thinking that's where the university can provide historical data. If you have issues with chemical contamination, why can't the university's chemistry or If you've got problems with drainage, why can't the hydrologists in architecture or the built environment as well as geography provide their academic input? This is the kind of thing that used to operate across the university, but we don't have any there's no coordination between that stuff. Matthew.
The three major drains that we have in Newcastle have never been deepened or widened.
Because they're concreted. The river doesn't have a chance.
Some of them are actually even underground.
Yeah.
Yes.
And unless you get, I think we've got to pay these days to get it.
That's what the architecture guys are doing. We had a presentation on Broadmeadow, it was a test case. The work that they do is just brilliant in terms of.
Well, I was here for that presentation on
Yeah,
Broadmeadow.
yeah.
But you can't, if we're going to have more high rise, we need more green space.
Yeah.
Because I think it's 9 square metres per person is needed in green space. And we just
difficult when the
infill.
housing imperative is really pushing everything.
Yeah,
but anyway, that's the kind of
but it's coming from the state government as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think. And of course we've got to get ready for the 2030 Commonwealth Games that apparently someone wanted to put on in Newcastle.
Anyway, so that's thoughts on the larger strategic plan. But here, for the time being, we've got Anne, we've got Gemma Bowman, and we've got a university librarian, Matthew Davis.
Thank you for the opportunity for speaking
I'm
up.
testing my dementia brain, and who are here to guide us through a discussion of what the community would like from the library and the university. Okay, so over to you, Anne.
Okay, so look, thanks for everyone attending in person and online. And I also want to thank people that have already been involved with the library strategic plan and given some good feedback to the library team. So as Johnny mentioned, the university's building its own strategic plan for over the next 3 to 5 years. And the library's plan is our focus and set direction also for the next 3 to 5 years, but to also align with the institution's goals and overall plan. So the team's consulting with students around the strengths, opportunities for improvement and aspirations. So this is the opportunity for the community now to also comment and have some input. So over the next few years, the university is working in a context of continuous change, and the trends that I've sent out with the questions, but I'll just go over them again now so you sort of got those in mind when we're thinking about questions, is around increased connectivity, digitisation, globalisation and equity of access, reduction and increase in government funding, and additional sources of funding and finding those efficiencies in what the university and the library does. Changes to the university footprint in Newcastle and particularly Central Coast with the extension into like Gosford and the teaching hospital down there. Continued commitment of student access, wellbeing and retention, including specifically in supporting First Nations students and students with special needs. And a continued commitment to Indigenising curriculum and incorporating First Nations knowledges. And also opportunities and challenges relating to the growth of generative AI. And changing requirements and expectations of students. So looking at flexible programs and personalised support for students. And the increasing cost of living, climate change and geopolitical changes are all happening around their life, and the cost of living particularly is a big issue. So for anyone at home, if you'd like to make a comment around the questions, I'll share each question in the chat so you can see it. If you're at home, you're welcome to either dive straight in if you want to participate, or down the bottom you can click the React tab if you want to put your hand up, or you can put a comment directly in the chat. If you don't want to speak and you just want to answer, just pop something in the chat. But we might, just begin with the first question, which was at the last Hunter Living in History session, participants talked about the University of Newcastle being a university for the community. In what ways and to what degree do you think being a university for the community should impact what the library does in the next 3 to 5 years?
Can I butt in and make a comment about it?
Yes.
The past, it seems to me, is always prologue. And I was, when you were talking about the field down there, I could be wrong here, Johnny, but I think it was Lieutenant Coke's diary where him and a mate were coming through Broadmeadow, through the marshy area, and they saw a mob of black swans swimming where the drains are now. I believe it was the location where the creeks came. They had a big description of it. And then there was that sad conclusion was we must remember to kill them on the way back. So our environmental damage started early in colonial times in terms of humans' attitude to the environment they were living in. And it brings me to, I suppose, before I get really positive about this great project, 2 cautionary comments about goal setting and heading for a particular goal. One comes from the late, great Godfrey Tanner, who shortly before his death took me for a couple of snorts at his bar. And then somehow or other, Godfrey and I ended up in the staff house having a late lunch, Doug. And at one point, Godfrey literally slammed his fist on the table and he said to me, "By gad, man, they're turning the place into a trade school." Now, looking back, there was a strong element of the profit in Godfrey. If you look at the fate of the classics department and other departments in this fine place, including, I might add, the mathematics faculty, of which I am equally a graduate, and it no longer exists. And it all reminded me of a Mickey Mouse cartoon that I saw many, many years ago, one of the early ones that he did, where Mickey was trying to get across this lake and his goal was to get to the other side in his steamboat, and he ran out of wood, so he started feeding the boat into the fire. So he was going to, eventually he got to his goal, but there was no boat. And that's what worries me about the university strategic planning. I know I can sound like an old fart, Doug, silver stone mate, but we've been here a long time, seen a lot of things, and we've been through a lot of planning exercises, and we've heard all the jargonese and all the consultancy jargonese you could possibly imagine, from stakeholders right through all the phraseology. However, we come back to community. Community built this university. The only reason it's here is because of community members. And I think at times this university forgets that. It seems to me the higher paid the hierarchy become, the more distant the local community are to them, the odd visit. So that image of Mickey Mouse feeding the boat into the fire brings me to archives. One of my great loves and thrills is working with archives and obviously co-creating with all you lot, including Ron and Co out there in Zoomland. That basically archives is precious. It needs to be funded properly, I feel, under any sort of planning, and along with Living Histories and the Glam Lab. But I vividly remember a couple of things from the Novocastrian Tales days when Gianni was a young assistant in the archives. I'm pretty sure you brought me a box of Percy Haslam's gatherings, so shall we say. And I opened this box up and it had boomerangs and it had waddies. And when I touched those real objects, but Johnny made me wear little gloves, but nevertheless, I felt that jolt of historic energy from those archival items.
Yep.
And that inspired me a lot. And you cannot digitise that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly believe there's a lot in archives that absolutely requires sufficient funding to not only preserve but to expand as history unfolds. But also I come back to personnel. Back then, I'm not quite sure actively what the personnel is at the moment. Back then, Johnny was a junior, and I would hope that there's some sort of continuity planning in terms of that that someone's being mentored to become a future Johnny, for instance, or a future Anne, so that they learn on the job and actually learn all the community contacts. Because around this room and in Zoom land, and for many of our friends who can't be here today, this place has been the centre of enormous co-creativity. And a lot of it, as many people here know, I've said that Anne and Gianni should have the in full black bold type catalyst. And I think this place is a tremendous catalyst. And I would not like that to be underestimated by the bean counters, who inevitably tend to be at the top of these trees, secretly fucking the consultants, so that the consultants come back with the answer they wanted in the first place. And so as a member of the community, I just say I hope this process is an honest one, where you are actually listening, because Doug and I particularly have been through a lot that haven't, and we've been promised they were. So basically, my voice is all for the university remembering that it was built out of the community by the community.
Very much so.
It needs to remember that.
Very much so.
And it needs to re-engage, I think, with different elements of the community. But I'll shut up now and I'll have something to say about the upper hunter later.
So Paul, thank you so much for your comments. And I think some of the things that you said do remind me of the engagement students have with archival records. And it's like they can look at digitised records and find things online, but you actually can notice the light bulb go on when they're actually physically holding objects
Absolutely.
and items. And we also had some Indigenous elders come in the other day and access the Percy Haskin item. So it's sort of like for them, it was
Absolutely.
especially.
Yeah.
Now,
Can I just quickly add to that? Because what you've touched on, the role of these two people here is so important. And the films that we make, every single film we make has their name as executive producer, because you can't make these films about Newcastle. Well, you know, and we're you guys as well, we work as well, but every film, you're the first people I call. When a grant comes through or I need a question, you guys are there. And I feel we are taking that, what you do, to the community. And it's researchers like yourself, it's objects, it's NBN footage, it's you know, it's so much stuff that we go to that makes films happen, that comes out of this space is really important. And the longer that keeps going and the bigger it gets, the better it is for the community, because there's so much value in archives, as you said. And, you know, to shine a light on the snowball photos you have, you know, every single film we've got ties back to this space, or there's an artefact that we've dug out. And I can't underestimate how grateful we are with what we do to connect with this part of the world, this part of the university.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's important. And I think if you want to engage the community, then we're doing our best to make engaging things that come from this place.
But it's also invisible. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
You know, an archive's like a cave, in some senses, in people's minds. And basically, we all know about it because we're engaged and kind of all interrelated with each other in some way, or as incestuous as that sounds. But many people don't know about it. And what worries me is when you get to the overseas office, where I've had attendance in the past, and that basically I feel that there's a bit of a cloud there that separates between people at that rank and the actual reality of archives and all the good it does, and the magic that it has from the perspective that you're talking about. The other one I remember, Johnny, was when the boxes came in from the Colosseum.
Yeah.
And
someone's done a thesis on Leo Kelly.
Yeah, that's it. And we found that Leo's manuscript in there. Just the magic of the moment, almost an archaeological dig, opening up some of those archival boxes. And those ones that just arrived. But I just think that magic needs to be honoured, and basically to do that, you need to have a continuity of personnel and mentoring of personnel and inspiration of personnel. Like people need to be inspired to be on fire about this, not just sort of placidly going, where are we going to put that fucking box? That's part of our continuity of history. And I think just as the archives are physical to that, we are a kind of spiritual and psychic element to that. So our knowledge that we contain within each of us needs to be honoured as well. And that's why you need to get significant funding in from the library into archives, etc., to continue that process, because I think it gets underestimated in terms of its power in research and also inspiration. Like my latest novel, to put in a plug here, Doug, it is set in Muswellbrook in Newcastle in 1942, and I've had a lot of cross-fertilisation support from people here. My friend Ron there with his new shutters behind him, Ron's at Fort Scratchley. Ron's given me great help with the military side of 1942. And a lot of that has happened because of this group. So Ron and I met each other through Living Histories. So there's an example.
I met Ron the same way.
Yeah, and John and I sort of conspired on a couple of things too, that in terms of the Carrington situation and stuff. And I just think that co-creation that this place engenders needs to be part of the equation of this plan that we're all talking about.
It's difficult to measure.
Yeah, and that's it from me, Dave.
I always see this place, rather than artificial intelligence, is real intelligence.
Yes.
But it's hard to measure the impact and how people are using. Now, Julie Keating, you jumped in first, and then we'll go to Ron afterwards. Sorry, Ron.
I'd just like to acknowledge the importance of the Local Histories website. I have published 9 books on Newcastle in the 1800s, and I'd like to thank Johnny and Anne for all their work that they put into the site and allowing it to be used freely. I also speak to Probus groups and U3A, and so the word is getting out there, and it just makes it so much easier from my point of view to be able to access the site. So I don't think you can underestimate the importance of the site. And as I say, I'm spreading sort of the word. A lot of the research I do and publish is based on Ralph Snowball photos. And I just so appreciate the ease with which I can use those. Obviously, I donate to the Vera Deakin Fund. So obviously, I hope that the Living History site continues to grow, but it is such an important part of our culture. And just as an aside, I'd like to say that I worked at the University Library from 1970 to 74 and in the 80s and 90s. So I have an understanding of the libraries. I also worked there when the first computer was introduced. So it's just absolutely marvellous to see the way the service has extended. So once again, I'd just like to say thank you so much, and the word is being spread throughout the community. Thank you.
Over to you, Ron.
I'd just like to reinforce what Paula and Julie have said. Like when I first started at Fort Scratchley, Bill Hanley and Graham Hall took me over to the archives, and we met Johnny, and his story about the cameras and so on works very well, because what we were there for was to see what could be done about the silk huge plan that Peter Scratchley had done of the fort. And I'm sure it's still stored very carefully in the archives, and it's a great thing to have. And soon after, I know Anna asked me, would I do a thing for National Trust when it was defending the country, I think was the theme in about 2012, I think. And between Johnny and Bill and myself, I think the university donated something of the order of about 6 very large snowball photos that were relevant to the fort telling that particular story. And then most recently, the Glamax Lab have digitised all of our videotapes and some 3G Super 8 film, which turned out not to be what we thought it was, but we're in the process of trying to recontact the family whose films they were. And I'd just like to say that there's so much time that I use the thing in research and so on that it's just so important that we can't afford to lose it, and it needs to be, it can be enhanced in whatever way possible. Thank you.
Well, we might move on to our second question now, which again I've just shared in the chat for people at home, but it's around how the university may be able to be more connected with other collections and sources of regional information like the Newcastle Libraries and Museum. What would this look like, and how strong should these connections be? So I think it was Warren Taggart at our last meeting, we sort of started talking about collections, similarities within our collections and possibilities in terms of how we could share resources. I think the Ralph Snowball archive is probably a good example, that we have quite a lot of glass plates from that archive, share it with Newcastle Local Studies.
The one I always just cite as an example is that work that Lachlan Weatherall did with our subdivision plans. So he Google mapped all our subdivision plans that were in Flickr so that people could search the Google map for the subdivision plan. It was dark shaded. If it was dark shaded, then you click on it for your street and up would come the subdivision plan on our digital site. So there were gaps in that, and the gaps were subdivision plans held in other libraries. So this was the important thing that helped dawn to me, is if we can get the other libraries to get their material in such a form that it can be sort of Googled and mapped into other delivery devices, then people don't need to know where it comes from. They just need to be interested in their area and click on that thing, and wherever that original digital resource is, they will find. So the gaps in that map, which is currently on the Under Living History site, could be things that are held in the National Library, could be things that are held in the State Library, could be things that are held in local studies. So it's the way people get access to this stuff. Sometimes it's very difficult to get. But
it's like a trove on a regional
level. That's what we've always
level,
advocated.
like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
But
and then to expand that, it's like, why stop at subdivision plans? Why can't there be any resource relating to that bit of? So you've got a problem with a particular patch of land in New Lambton or in Lambton. Why can't we draw anything that relates to that area?
So a good example of that is also something that Lachlan Weatherall did, which was the university and also I think the State Library down there has got hundreds and hundreds of aerial photos where they take a plane and they fly it across the whole of the Hunter Valley and come back. So several hundred of those, and the ones taken in the mid-century, most of the Hunter Valley is bush. So if you're looking for something at Milbrodale, you've got to, how do you do that? So what Lachlan has done, at no expense for anyone, but a community member has come in and said, I'll put the centre of those onto a Google map as an index, the same as the real estate ones. So you go to Google, look up Milbrodale, and then look up the aerial photo from 1944 or 1974 or whatever, and you've got it there. So it's added value by having an index. And that it hasn't cost the university anything.
Because looking at those images on Flickr or in Living Histories, you wouldn't know where you are.
That's right.
You need that context of the landscape. You need someone who knows that pattern of that plane and that route to do it. Now, so this is the thing, Matthew, with the gigantic big
walls that they've got. They've got a fantastic display wall in the digital library in town. These kind of experiments can be done. I always envisage having young students. We've currently got these guys in these startup businesses that are working with AI technologies, new technologies. I'd love to give them these sorts of problems to work on. So this is what we would like to do. Can you come up with something? And have them working in teams. And the library can be central to that kind of experimentation. If we can set up some kind of stuff, so some students can be watching a performance going on of other students playing around with this stuff, and then someone might come in, as happened with that AI experiment with the Nobby's engraving, where they used AI to turn it into colour. And then I said to them, can we make the waves move? And then they made the waves move. And then I said, I'd like to see the clouds move. And they made the clouds move. And then I said, I'd like to go a fly around. And then they completely got peeved with me and said, no, you're coming to the AI workshop. You can learn how to do it. But that's the kind of experiment that you keep pushing. Yeah. Eric. Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Well, I was essentially going to say a similar thing as you, because personally, while I've been working on the Sintra collection, there's so many links to different libraries and national archives. I've found links to the war memorial stuff. Everything can be linked, and I agree. Like, there has to be some kind of universal, like, researcher accessible format, because the amount of links is wild. Like, we need to have like a consistent searchable thing, and I'm thinking this is actually a fantastic opportunity, like, for a university that wants to be like a leader in spaces, and that we have so many opportunities here to like put innovative research in this kind of thing, and we could like be the example for other universities and like other, like, you know, national, state libraries, everything. If we could invent a system that all of Australia could use, it would really lift us up in that leadership position as well. And I think, you know, we've got researchers here that can do that. We've got students that can contribute to that. We're like sitting on a gold mine of opportunity here for us to like really raise the university up and like be the authority and leader in how we deal with this kind of stuff.
And the snowball thing is the obvious one, though, isn't it? That's that top of the pyramid. You've got these two vast collections that are so important to the whole history of Newcastle, and one is available for free, one not so much, but also to the fact you can't search it all at once. That would be amazing. You've got all these.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it, but it's yeah.
And also the human dimension of that, which links to something my friend Robert said at the last meeting that I wasn't at. See, I'm a mind reader, Robert.
Yes.
I want to thank Robert. He helped me create a scene of a World War II gun pit in Lambton for my new novel. So thank you to Robert Watson. But you said something at that last meeting about your idea was to find a university that's functional, so to speak, and emulate. But I was just thinking about, and I talked to Anne about this earlier, in working on this new book, I've been using a lot of my Muswellbrook contacts because I have a lot of family there. But the local history mob in Muswellbrook have been helping me with the book. And it occurred to me that we could link up more with such groups. That's just the one in Muswellbrook, which is fairly significant because of the history of the place, but there's probably one in Singleton, no doubt, and have more speakers from them, either via the Zoom or here in person, to sort of broaden out the Hunter Histories network out a bit to include some of these established groups and bring them into that network you're talking about of the university being a focal point, if you like, almost like not quite a clearinghouse, but a sorting house or whatever, and a catalyst for ideas. And you've got, obviously at Lambton, we've got the family history, we've got, but there are all sorts of different volunteer groups out there who, if they had a forum whereby one of their members could come and speak. I'll give you a classic example. I stumbled across my Lambton friends, as Julie and co would know about and Robert, the early history of electricity in Lambton, etc. And sadly, some of the council ending up in jail as a result. But that's Lambton for you. But then when I was looking at my Muswellbrook stuff, looking at the early electricity in Muswellbrook was a fascinating comparison with what happened in Lambton, even around things what they chose to electrify. First, with Lambton, it was pubs. Well, no, sort of. But there are connections there that you wouldn't have unless you literally had a forum whereby different groups can feed information or inspirational tales or projects into it. So just a thought that maybe with all this digital realm and indeed physical with modern transport, that we can link up more with some of those history groups that already exist but probably feel a bit lonely in their place, so to speak.
Classic example is what happens with John Whitty's Rainbow History Group. So they curate that information.
And we often forget there's university staff based in Muswellbrook. So I think that upper Hunter link is really important. And the environmental sort of research and aspect as to what's happening in the coal industry.
And ironically, they're right next to Weedman's Cottage, which is where the local history mob up in Muswellbrook have all their stuff and meat.
Yeah,
so you could literally, they could walk across. But that's a classic example, where just communication and a vision.
Yeah.
And I think as part of the library plan, perhaps that could be looked at in terms of, because that's one that doesn't require big bucks, but it requires personnel to actually be engaged or volunteers like us to make it happen.
And because we have the meetings over Zoom, it's perfect. It's easy. Lovely comment from Shelley. Well done, Erica.
Thank you.
Good idea, thoughts. And also, I think with having an online platform, like we do already have a global audience, so it sort of does make sense to build up and make it more user-friendly, I guess.
So one of the things, just looking at your question about what should it look like and how strong should it be, is one of the analogies I often use is if you want to look up an old newspaper, there's only one place you go, it's Trove.
Yeah.
It's it. That's it. It's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
The university here and the library needs to work out, do you want your archive to be the pinnacle of something that everyone bows down to, or do you just want to be a member of the swamp that's out there? The problem with the swamp that's out there is there's museums like in Bega that's shut down, and Hill End is shut down, and their pub shut down as well. And their society's falling apart, and the people there don't know what to do with their stuff other than, well, we'll just auction it off. And same with West Wall's End. So my vision, which is grandiose, if the university wanted to become the pinnacle of history for Australia or New South Wales or whatever, then all of those places that are shutting down would go, we can't shut down unless we go to Newcastle and tell them what we're doing.
Yeah.
At the moment, they're just withering on the vine, unfortunately.
Well, a classic example of that, Robert, in Muswellbrook relatively recently was the Masons shut down.
I know.
But unfortunately, all of their paperwork and library has been moved across, I think, to the history people that I'm working with. At Weedman Cottage.
Yeah.
But once again, I don't know that they have enough personnel to deal with that, like to collate all that. But there's a huge slab of Masonic history that we go back right into the mines and the Welsh Masons and the whole that would have otherwise been lost for what Robert was just saying. But it's funny how you got it back to the swamp, Robert.
Yes.
We started it.
Do you like that?
Yeah, I did.
Newcastle was a swamp, and it will be again when global warming really hits in. In fact, a lot of people in the world won't realise. They don't realise just how important it is to look at global warming, because most of the big countries like Trump's America, they don't realise what's going to happen when the great ports of the world start to find that they are underwater. But look how important libraries are. I mean, I just, you realise when, just as a student, you've seen things, but when you go to, say, Alexandria and see the great library there, and you think of how important that was, and what we've lost with its with the burning down of the original, but the connection of the university having its library is so important. And this strategy, it needs to actually put that top of the strategy. This happens every 4 or 5 years. A university develops a strategy because times are changing, but it's always important to keep that nodal point of the university in this web of interests. And look, you can't just decide what the interests are. They develop as world develops.
Yeah, and any plan has to have the flexibility to respond to that evolution. And my Indigenous brothers and sisters, the library here already does a magnificent job on the site on every level. But we were talking, Robert, about expanding to get the network of history groups, etc., and see if we can get more of them feeding in and perhaps making presentations here. The same would apply to various Indigenous groups throughout the region who hold the non-European history and tales, or who can illuminate some of the Indigenous history that is present in this archive, but who can bring a different illumination onto it. I think there's the magic for the university as well, which you've already started. You've made a huge foundation in terms of your investment in reconciliation, and I've done a lot of work with Johnny and co here in the archives on reconciliation projects, and it's to be absolutely laudable what you've already done, but it is still a great platform for the possibility of the university library having an archive and a collection that is something that people come to. Because of that co-creative capacity and that sharing of knowledge and insight that can only happen when you create that. It's the magic of the people. When I hear you talk about film, I feel the magic. And you don't get that if I'm just, reading a pamphlet on it. You sort of, so I think that's what the university, the core of the library plan. To me, the library is the heart of the university. Sadly, some of the technocrats above us won't even know how to find the place. And I'm a mathematician as well as an arts person, but sadly it's the truth. And that's a truth that I think we collectively need to remind them of in some way, especially when it comes to these sort of plans, because otherwise the library will just get sort of the offerings off the side of the table as a token gesture, whilst AI and everything else gets...
It's something to remember that, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of you're a scientist, but you're also an artist.
Yeah.
And I feel that in the march to STEM, the arts have sort of been subdued here, thinking they're not as important. But, I'm doing the art history of the school, which has been one of the strands of the university history. It was in the middle of the war. You've got the leaders of Newcastle going, we're going to have to do something about the arts and dance. And not the jitterbug, because they're not real dancers, but, they were talking about the arts as being important. I mean, this is why we're fighting these wars, is for the arts, so it's something very important to restore.
And I think what Doug was talking about the environmental issues, which is sort of one of the themes to look at. It's like an example is the climate records and the collaboration with other universities and the really important work. And so the needs come out of the community depending on demand campaigns. Judy, did you want to say something?
I just think we need to look at the children and to start educating the children at a younger age, even visual, into schools and how you're using AI to show movement. But I think we need to get the children engaged in history. That doesn't seem to be happening. I know my children are not the least bit interested in history. I can't get to come along to anything. So I think that we need to look at the younger and get them. The younger that we can get them, the better. The Indigenous are doing that with their books in schools. That I think that we need. The children don't even learn about the early explorers in Australia. We seem to be losing our history And it comes all back to education.
Can I just, on that point, the two Indigenous films we made, which were very much birthed here, like talking to you guys, and the Lysett film and the Threcold film, they came out of here. We did as much as we could. Both Tony and I, who made the films, our wives are primary school teachers. So we had an eye on how do we make this accessible for kids. And I'm proud to say that the work that was started here, taking from the archive things in Threcold and Lysett, NITV, which is, the National Indigenous Network, picked up both those films. One film that is 40 minutes long, they sent us an offer an hour and 15 minutes after I sent the email of the film. So they watched it, and this has all come from here. And both Tony and my wives get told all the time how much they're showing parts of those films in school, local schools. I can't get it in the curriculum. I've tried to fight saying, why don't we teach this as part of the curriculum? I just can't get that to happen. But 100% connection from the work of these two people here in the archive and all the people around that, going through to exactly what you're saying we need to have has been happening. So the more of that we can do. And it's also the arts, like Lysett is art. Like they're paintings with knowledge contained.
We have the Children's University, and maybe it's something that special collections can have more input into the kids coming to visit. Like they have a pretty superficial visit, I think. Like I know they pack a lot in, but like just a resource plan or something working. We often work with the education, like lecturers, and they do try to embed Newcastle Hunter content. But how much it's actually
Well, when we were doing Novocastrian Tales, going back quite a few years now, to link the archives, we did local history. We were working with local history and council, and we were working out here, obviously, with archives. But one of the things we did was look at all the colonial imagery. And we wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't all archived and curated. And we looked at thousands, literally thousands of colonial oil paintings, etchings, and it was all ironically aimed at creating the word pictures we needed to try to capture those eras in the book Novocastrian Tales. But it was a classic example of that interconnectedness of the resources and the teams to bring about an artistic outcome. And I just think people often don't realise how lateral all that can be, but it has to exist to be able to be played with.
So just tying into all that, like about the schools and the younger generations and stuff, working on the Sintra project, I've noticed a lot of like how much we can tie in to schools here. So imagine, like what I was thinking was, imagine if we got not placement students necessarily, but just like secondary teaching students here or primary teaching students here. Like Anne was saying, we connect with that discipline. There's letters I've looked at that would be really useful for young kids to learn about the First World War with, but they'd be also learning about someone from their region. They would feel more connected to learning about that. And that's all part of building, resilient and strong communities and the youth having like some kind of connection to their heritage and where they're from. So I think there's huge opportunities here to, we can get students to try to align the curriculum, because I know that is a huge issue, to try to align things with curriculum. So, we could get people in on that. We could get students to write their own lesson plans or develop lesson plans as part of the curriculum, and then we can offer that to the schools of the region. And then so we've kind of got this flow-on effect that comes from the archives here, and like students are benefiting, the community's benefiting, the younger generations are feeling more connected to their community, and that is like a national and university priorities about creating stronger communities, which comes from a sense of belonging. So if kids are kind of learning about stuff that's more relevant to them or the area that they're from in schools, I think that would be a huge benefit and something that the university can help with.
And I wondered whether or not there's some cross-fertilisation with students that could happen in the building or the expanding of the Living Histories Network, whether or not the university could sponsor or mentor or even postgraduate students or younger students in being involved in connecting some of these communities, either by travelling there and speaking to them and giving them an invitation to appear here or whatever, but whether or not the actual students can be part of this, so us old farts can learn from them as well, in other words. But yes, whether or not that is a way that gets around funding some of the, funding issues that as soon as we say expand something, the bean counters are going to go, and how are we going to pay for this? And I understand that argument, but maybe there is a way of utilising the resources that exist already in a clever, creative way that gives them academic experience, but actually expands this network and its power to share historic facts.
Now that leads on to the next question. So
Can I just say
15
there, I
minutes.
believe that the NAPLAN plan hasn't been working, and they are going to change the way that they're going to be teaching children in the schools in the future. So that might involve.
Yeah, big opportunities there.
Okay, so the next question is are there ways the library can connect with the university with community members in new and better ways? So Paul, that's what you've just been talking about. Do you have talents and resources you would love to share you haven't been able to? So we sort of have been doing it in a very informal, unstructured way. So if we have students come to us that want expert knowledge, expertise, we often put them in contact and share an email discussion or arrange a physical meeting. So that sort of happens informally. But do you think that's like there's other ways it could be done, or that value of knowledge sharing, industry professionals?
Yeah, well, one of the things is, if I be critical of that, say it's easier for us to say, oh, we got all this stuff, why don't people come and look at it? But you've got to start the other end, which is, well, what does the community want? So when I was doing the Walls End 150th stuff, I grabbed photos from here and Trove articles to put on the Facebook group, and just started feeding one or two per day. And the number of people following that group went up by 29 people every day for 18 months. 29 people every day. And that was because I looked at the group as it existed and thought, well, they're just waffling on about, I remember when the cemetery used to be here and it was waffly sort of stuff. So I started feeding them stuff, and one thing led to another, and it grew. And sort of associated with that, about 8 years ago, when we went to the final year communication students and said to the lecturers there, can your students do a study on us for marketing? Yeah. So we had 4 groups. And the single thing I remember was each of those groups said, looking at the Hunter Living Histories blog, was, we didn't know this stuff existed. This is fantastic. We know all of these places, we didn't know the history. So it's not that they weren't interested, it's just that they didn't know. And so the marketing or the promotion is a little bit more than just posting stuff up. You've got to understand how they're receiving it. And my understanding is, if I ask a young person, is that they're not on Facebook, right? They're on Instagram or TikTok.
TikTok, yeah.
That's right. So we should be having some dancing happening. And so Facebook is not there, but Facebook works for us.
What was interesting, the example Erica brought to us was that she was on TikTok. It was a global discussion, American audience, and they were talking about the University of Newcastle's magic collection of books.
Yeah, so how that happened was, because I'm interested in like witchy history, that kind of thing, and I'm just scrolling, and there was a man, I think I'm pretty sure it was American audience, he was American, he had like an old grimoire and he was showing everyone. I go in the comments, people saying the University of Newcastle Special Collections has that kind of stuff if you want to go look, and everyone's jumping in the comments like, oh, do we need an appointment? Can we go there? And I'm like, oh my God, this is in America and everyone's jumping in like, I'm from Newcastle and I've been to special collections and I've seen that. And it was mind blowing. I'm like, oh my God, we need to get on TikTok and start promoting, because that's, like you said, that's where we all are. So everyone was really interested to know how they could access it, all that kind of stuff. So there was interest there.
That's why young people aren't on Facebook. They don't want to be anywhere where their parents are.
And the other trick that I learned is if you invite people onto any of those platforms, you've got to say to them, and when you're there, will you tick like or put a comment? Because the people of our generation look at something, oh, that's interesting, and then they move on. Go, can you tick like? And as soon as you start ticking likes, it works. And they go, oh, this is actually pretty easy. I just hit that little button. Yeah, we'll do it. Sorry.
9 minutes. I might actually come to the last question, which is what would you like to see in terms of special collections and archives in 2030? I would really, like, there's some examples. I would really be proud to see fill in the gaps.
Well, I'd like to see Doug at a Living Histories meeting in 2030.
I was just thinking that it might be our ashes.
Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to comment? 2030?
2030.
It's not that far away now.
Let's do. So I just want to say, since I started my placement here at the beginning of the year before becoming the intern, so I've only been here for almost a year now. But I just want to say that as a kind of the unique perspective I've gotten both as a student and as like a staff member this year, I've become so invested in the Glam Lab and special collections and archives. And what I would really like to see is more, I don't know if innovation is the right word, but I keep telling Anne this, I'm like, we're the only university that has a Glam Lab. Like, that's huge. Do you know what I mean? And Glam is about experimenting and researching and trying new things. And I feel like we're just in such a good position to pump a lot of research into it and just help not only our regions, which is super important, but like Australia in general with the research we can come out with about archiving and digital preservation and preserving born digital materials and how we can serve community alongside that. We've got like a wonderful synergy between students, community and researchers here. So what I would like to see is a lot of energy being put into new ideas and how we can like be building and be better and better and better help our communities and researchers and students in that synergistic way. But yeah, I'd like to see dedicated research coming out of the Glam Lab itself personally. That's something I get really excited about. So
and it was something that came up when the Glam Lab was first established was the idea of having work integrated learning. So that was the whole idea of setting the lab up. And as from this year, it's compulsory for every student, but also the possibility of having postgrads doing placements. So it's sort of that space where they can digitise, they can analyse, they can edit. It's sort of that extra support that I don't think is anywhere else in the university. But from a community perspective, is there, and I'm just listening to what Erica's saying from like student perspective.
I really didn't know this existed until Susan told me. So I think probably there could be more feedback to the community that this actually exists. And I think you could probably have a whole building just to do. And yeah, I just don't think the community is engaged in history. There's so many history societies that are shutting down. Merriweather Historical Society has got, I haven't even seen it, but it's at someone's house and this gentleman's getting older. And one day we're going to need somewhere where we can put all this information. I just think the community needs to know more. I mean, the little snippets that NBN put on television of what happened in the past, it's all very well, but
without acknowledging all the work that Mark and Phil and the crew do in that little room.
Yes.
We watched it last night. There was no acknowledgement of what the Glam Lab does
I
or the
thought that might
volunteers.
be
That's
funny
what's
about the
there.
bee dancing at the Prince of Wales
Fantastic
Hotel back
that-
in the 60s.
that- It was all on dance last night.
I just was thinking about Recollect just a minute ago, and Recollect here, is it possible to link with other Recollect sites which are doing the same sort of archiving, digital archive, and then possibly become a whole network in Australia?
It needs to be a network, really, doesn't it? Or just
Even
one
if just have a
whole
link
unit.
to another one. So that's an idea.
Can I say I've been really inspired by Erica today, by her enthusiasm and passion.
Me too.
And I don't want to be an old bastard being patronising, Erica, but I have been, and it actually is educational in the sense that it would be great if more of that could happen, where there was an interaction between the generations. It also strikes me as funny that we all kind of know each other now, most of us in this circle, and others who are absent friends. But we ourselves are a great tale in a bizarre kind of way about all the divergent voices and activities in the area coming together around a table or in a network like this is a tale in itself. And if people don't know about each other, and they don't know, for instance, what happens in the Mechanics Institute at Lambton unless they know, like they know the signs on the front and stuff. But I just think there's a wonder there, and if we can get the generations to share in it, it leads to part of that mentoring I was talking about hopefully there's a young Gianni being mentored. Not that he can ever be replaced, or a young Ian.
My concern is that we're going to be confronting all sorts of problems coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Things about flooding and land use and just how to get on as human beings.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to see us really take a part in. Okay, so if there's flooding issues, then I want this university activated. I want us to do our bit historically, but I want to work with my colleagues in architecture, in hydrology, in whatever it is that university can provide to help the community with it, whatever problem it's dealing with. If we can, that's what I would like to see by 2030, some kind of thing that brings this stuff together, because that's the world you and your daughter and children are going to be inheriting, and it's something we need to be working.
We never know what's happening until the plans are already there. So that's what's wrong. The plan is to have the 2030 Commonwealth Games. No one's asked us whether we want the Games, but someone out there has decided, therefore we need all these playing fields, so it's got to be done now.
And it's sort of state significance of bypass local council anyway, so but often that's when we do get a flood of inquiries around just access to
And an international airport. Did anyone ask us whether we wanted an international airport?
Support.
I've only got one flight in and out. That's Bali.
Yeah. No, Japan's next, I think. So
Paul, I know the feedback that we've had from students that we invite to this meeting to sort of share what they've been working on and reflect. They get as much out of meeting the community because that's where they're going to end up working with the community. So
this is invaluable to me, so thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So that's probably something we could do.
And I can't wait to work with you on the project.
Yeah,
So we've got 1 minute. Was there anyone sitting in Zoom who would like to have any final comments? If not, Marilla, you've got your hand up? I think you're on mute.
Which is muted.
Muted.
You're muted.
While we're waiting for you to unmute, anyone that wants to send questions.
Yeah, done.
Go on, Marilla.
Sorry, kids. Yeah. I was just asking Joe, it was the thing we were watching the other night, which is learning hugely from the past, how the near past and the future repeat them. How the near and the very far past repeat themselves. It was about the city of Petra and the earthquake that wrecked the city, which would absolutely rival any megapolis in the world today, and its water storage systems and all of the things that had evolved over generations went to dust and were not there to be learnt from for the future. I think the thing that we've got with 100 Living Histories and with the technology we've got now is to show the past as much as possible and maybe develop an agenda of not forgetting to learn from the past and the efforts of previous people in Australia, for example, the Indigenous people, of creating use out of our disasters and preparing for what we're preparing for now, which is more disasters in the future. Linking the past and the future, I guess, is what I'm saying could be a worthy agenda to come out of placement.
Thank you.
That's all.
That exhibition that you've got downstairs, I didn't know that was on, and I'm an ex-registered nurse, so and I'm just wondering whether you would like anything on how we practice our nursing, the different things that we did then, like every patient coming in back having your analysis done.
Yes.
And we started off with Bunsen burners and test
Yeah,
tubes.
yeah.
Have an oral history program. So again, this is where we can link up students to capture the stories.
And during the midwifery, when someone has some toast and drip to bring on their labour, we didn't have machines. We had to count the drips every 15 minutes to make sure that the drips weren't going too quickly, otherwise they could have a ruptured uterus.
So I reckon we'll capture an oral history with you. I'll
done?
just hand back to Johnny.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. That was, did you get enough?
Could I just, so obviously been listening to all this great discussion, and I guess what I'm hearing, I mean, underlying everything is that preservation piece, making sure we keep and we can continue to protect and look after what we've got, and also looking to the future about how we build that collection. But for me, it's all coming together into three things. One is the promotion of what we've got, so both to the community, to our academics, to our researchers, to our students. Connection, so that's with other collections here and around the region or around the state or country. Connection with the academics, connection with community groups. So being that nexus. And the last one around there that's all working in is that collaboration. So that's trying to collaborate with other institutions to expand the usefulness of what we've got and the ease of discovery, but also that collaboration with students and partners to try and, amplify and build on what we've got. Is that a good summary of what?
Yeah. Training has a lot to do with it. I don't mean this in a negative way, but years ago, some of you may remember, when I was working with local history, they had some of our stuff stored in their storage area. But I found out later that the council used to engage, now quite rightly, but they were engaging wounded workers, from the gardens and stuff, were being sent in there as their storemen or archivists or whatever in that collection, without any real training. And one guy used to drive his motorbike in each day and just drive it in with the petrol fumes going and park it up against the actual archives, down in stacks. Because I went down there to find an art exhibition of mine that had been on in the Lovett Gallery, and they had it in storage. And this guy's motorbike was leaning up next to it, and there was a big sign on it saying, "Do not stack vertically." And they had it stacked vertically. So what then happened was we came into an agreement that this wasn't good. And so I ended up bringing it out here with the council's permission, and I sort of insisted, to be honest, in terms of preservation. It was a pretty significant exhibition about reconciliation. So Amir and Johnny got Amir on the job, and it's now stored beautifully here in archives, and they're huge plates. They're just beautiful things, photographic plates of black and white people together, and it was all about, I guess, the evolution of racism and reconciliation combined, really, the exhibition. But there was an example where, the lack of training in a certain institution could have learnt from the blessings of this institution. At that stage, I just moved it over here, which is where it sits. But yeah, there's probably cross-fertilisation that can happen in that realm as well. Now, I'm sure that's all improved. I'm not trying to bag the current efforts, that's going back many years, in at the council archive, but it has to be done properly, I guess is what I mean. No motorbikes.
I'll take you downstairs next to the Harley Davidson. I think we're over time, aren't we?
Oh, there's just one comment that Julie has left in regard to like her fabulous books and heritage walks. Is there a policy for adding these things to living histories? So that'd be like a donation and like a digital donation. To add to living histories. Yeah. So I'll email you about that, Julie. Yeah.
Anyway, look, thank you very much for all your input today. It's been absolutely wonderful and
Thank you.
humbled by the comments. It's lovely to hear. And we'll see you all next month in October for our next showcase.
It's the second Monday.
Second Monday of
Second
October,
Monday, because the first is a holiday.
Yeah, the first is a holiday, so we'll be meeting at the second.
Right.
Thank you very much for all your input today and be kind to one another. See you next time.